So what I'm going to talk about, very briefly, is an entity called the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the TPPA. Now, why on earth am I going to talk about something that is branded as a trade agreement? Well, to draw on another event of the last week, let me give you an analogy. If this agreement goes through, it will be the equivalent to having Don Brash as Prime Minister in a majority party to do whatever he wants for the next century. Let me make just 3 brief points about this agreement to explain why it's important. It might be described as a trade agreement, but it's actually not. It's an agreement of investor rights that is designed to guarantee the rights of the international corporates across the 9 countries that are a party to these negotiations. The US, Australia, Chile, Singapore, Peru, New Zealand, Brunei, Malaysia, and Vietnam. So it is an investment agreement, and some of you here will remember a campaign we had against a multilateral agreement on investment, or the MAI. Well, this is the MAI on steroids. We defeated that. It's come through the back door, and if it is able to be concluded, it will guarantee foreign investors an enormous range of rights, including the right to take the New Zealand government to a private, secret, international arbitration court for mega millions of dollars in damages if we regulate in ways that reduce the profitability and value of their investment. Now, I'm going to give you some examples in a moment. But that's point 1, why we should be concerned about it. Point 2 is that this is an agreement that has no end point. Once it is signed, it is there effectively forever. The third thing that we need to be aware of is that it is being negotiated in secret. We don't get to see the text until it is concluded and signed off by the Cabinet. International treaties are conducted by the executive. The Parliament does not have any effective say in this process until the deal is done. So we don't get to see what they're negotiating behind closed doors, unless there are leaks, until it is too late to influence it. So what kind of things might this agreement involve? Well, some of you will remember that Hone Harawira led the charge in the Māori Affairs Select Committee, having a set of hearings around tobacco controls and smoking, and the way that that toxic product is killing tens of thousands of New Zealanders a year. And there were various recommendations from that, including things like plain packaging tobacco, putting a tax on the cigarette companies to pay some of the health bill, and so on. And a number of other countries, Australia, are introducing plain packaging tobacco as well. One of the submissions by the US companies to the US trade negotiator has come from Philip Morris, and it says, one of the things we want to use this agreement for is to guarantee our rights as investors to the value of our trademark and the value of our products and being able to sell them, so that if anyone introduces these tobacco controls, we can take the government to these private international courts and demand compensatory damages for any loss of value to our company or our business. That's one example. Another example, Pharmac. Pharmac is what allows us to have affordable medicines in this country. It means that the health budget goes further. Big pharmaceutical companies in the US hate it. There was a statement that came out yesterday from them to the US trade negotiator saying Pharmac is an egregious example of the kinds of policies that need to be struck down by the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because it means that the drug companies can't set whatever price they want to extort health dollars to go into their coffers. So Pharmac is, through the intellectual property and investment parts of this agreement, on the table. Strategic assets. We know what a great success all the privatisations were for the companies that bought them. And we know that we've had to re-establish Kiwibank, we had to buy back Air New Zealand, we had to buy back the railways, we've had to re-establish ACC. We know that a key brash government will rapidly sell off anything that's left. This agreement not only will guarantee that they have the right to bid for these assets, but it will put barriers in place to us doing any of that kind of reversal in the future. Petrobras, which Sandra mentioned, we know that that drilling is being allowed offshore with virtually no regulation in place to be able to stop the kind of disasters that we saw with BP in the US. If a government finally decides to regulate, those companies will say, and we know the big oil companies come from the US, they will say this is an expropriation of our value, this is an unfair and inequitable treatment, and we want compensation from the New Zealand government for any loss that we suffer as a result of the new regulations. PPP contracts. We know that the prisons, soon to be the schools, a whole range of other public-private partnerships will guarantee foreign firms income from our coffers for at least 30 years, even if they are dismal failures. Those rights will be protected through these kinds of agreements. We also know that we will confront in the 21st century all sorts of challenges that make the neoliberal paradigm unworkable. We know that the kind of job insecurities and rampant inequalities that exist within and between countries are unsustainable. And we see in Europe the examples of the failures there. We see them in Latin America, and those economic crises are behind many of the other resistances that we see around the world. This agreement will stop us responding to those challenges. It will lock us in for the next century to a global free market paradigm, behind our backs, without us being able to see what they're doing. Why are they doing this? Why would the New Zealand government do this? And it started under Labour,